Hey gang, John here. Welcome back. I hope everybody got to enjoy their 15 minutes of freedom between the summer session and the fall session. Uh, I know it certainly felt too short for me, and I would be willing to bet that it felt too short for you. This is going to be a really quick little talk, just kind of outlining where we're headed for the course for the semester. Uh, uh, the agenda for this week is journal entries focused on introductions, a review of our syllabus, and then uh, I've got here on the slide discussion of our first reading. We'll see about that. I'm not certain that we need to have a second discussion entry for the first week. So if the discussion forum doesn't make any reference to the reading, don't feel obligated to comment on the reading. Okay? Thanks. Um, Now, I know most of us know each other pretty well from the last several terms, but if in the discussion forum you could take just a few minutes to share your name, actually, the forum will do that for you. If you could tell us how you got here or how you became interested in clinical rehabilitation and mental health counseling. If you have any specific areas of interest or specialty, ultimate goals, that would be fantastic. And then, like I say, I know that summer was short. If you can share anything cool that you managed to squeeze into the summer, into your uh, introductory entry, that would be fantastic. So, it is an ethics course. We are studying ethics. It means we're going to be looking at ethics codes, at legislation, regulations, agency rules, all of these kinds of things. Now, I am going to be the first person to admit that uh, on the face of it, these topics can actually be a little on the boring side. So I work to fight against that. And usually, at least according to course evals, you guys agree that we end up having a pretty good time while we're learning some of these new ideas, even the drier stuff. So I've tried to conceptualize the topic of ethics in a way that has real, tangible value for us as practitioners, as clinicians. Um, I have found over time that ethics and risk management, we're going to talk a lot about risk management throughout the semester, um, as being kind of analogous to ethics. But in any case, I found that talking about ethics and risk management are studied more effectively as an individualized system for professional decision making that's conceptualized in terms of a strong, positive professional identity that reflects a developmental process of integrating our individual intrapersonal frameworks or internal frameworks and empirically grounded clinical standards. I apologize for the unevenness of the slides. Sometimes that happens as I transfer from PowerPoint to the film uh, medium, to the video medium. So basically, what I'm getting at here is that yes, we're going to look at ethics codes. Uh, yes, we're going to look at legislation. But what we really want to be working on is developing our own awareness uh, and integrating the way that we think about ethics as individuals with formal empirical standards. And I think you'll find that that is a little bit, or actually a lot less boring. Because when we talk about the tangible value of ethics and risk management, we start to look at issues that are values oriented, that are process based, some how to stuff. Is what process based refers to. Process based also refers to the internal processes that we go through in making ethical decisions. Um, we conceptualize ethics as a process of reflective self-awareness. And I bet that idea of self-awareness is starting to sound kind of repetitive from me. At least I kind of hope it is. It has a place in theory. It has a place in crisis for those of you who took the crisis course over the summer. So self-awareness is really where it's at for a lot of various aspects of counseling. We need to be aware of our individual values, of our individual beliefs, and this is a developmental process. In pretty much any time you hear the term developmental in the context of counseling or psychology or counseling psychology, it's a professor trying to sound fancy, talking about a process that changes and grows. So what we're basically saying is that we want to become aware, increasingly aware of our values and our beliefs, and that hopefully this is a developmental process, a process that grows. So I'm going to be a better ethical decision maker tomorrow than I am today. And hopefully today I'm a better ethical decision maker than I was yesterday. And then we take these individual characteristics and we anchor them to objective standards. So there are a lot of different things that we're going to look at that are objective standards. Research, certain ethics codes, all different types of sources. So what I want you to think about is the intersection between your own individual values and beliefs and objective standards. And how do your individual values and beliefs accommodate and relate to objective standards? I'd also ask you, and this I actually will add to the discussion, I'd ask you to take a minute to think of an area of ethics that you feel will be especially helpful or important to cover this semester, and write it down at the end of your discussion entry. And I really request and I challenge you to not just look at the entry of the person in front of you and write down the same idea that they have. You'll see the purpose for this exercise in subsequent weeks. I'll go ahead and reveal the big secret. What I do is I compare important areas of ethics that are important to one section with areas of ethics that are important to other sections. And then we also look at that in the context of the broader literature in terms of where are the most complaints filed? What areas are counselors having the most difficulty navigating? What areas are counselors seeking the most guidance. And it actually ends up providing a pretty interesting discussion, because what we find is that many of us stumble with the same ideas and the same challenges. And maybe more encouragingly, oftentimes we're doing fairly well. If you look at inquiries to ethical decision-making bodies, say like the groups that write the ethics codes, if you look at inquiries to these bodies made by individual counselors, the inquiries are fairly similar. And what we see is that the choices and decisions that counselors make are, generally speaking, pretty darned ethically solid. So that's a lot to say about a small thing I'm asking you to do. Just write down something that you're specifically interested in. Maybe you're interested in multicultural concerns. Maybe you are interested in ethics related to assessment, confidentiality, whatever it may be. Just kind of write that down at the end of your discussion entry. And I will put a little kind of tickler reminder in the discussion form itself to help you remember to include that. I'm also going to ask you guys to, we're not going to do it right now. I'm certainly not taking out the syllabus and going over it line by line. While you do the same, I think that would be pretty torturous. I do want you to take a close look at the syllabus for a few reasons. One, to kind of help you chart out your semester, develop a plan for allotting your time, and making for yourself a system that's going to allow you to complete everything we need to accomplish without feeling rushed and without feeling like you're doing a, pardon my French, half-assed job. I would also ask you to look at the syllabus to see if you can find any mistakes that I've made, because as you guys have probably figured out by now, frequently the bare bones of a syllabus are based on the previous semester's syllabus. So if something doesn't look right, or somewhere you see a date that says 2016, draw that to my attention. Or if I list two separate due dates for the same assignment, I'd be grateful if you bring that to my attention. But mostly really do take a good 15, 20, 25 minutes, have a cup of coffee, look over the syllabus, become familiar with it. It will help orient you towards what we're going to be doing over the course of the semester. So, Chapter 1 touches a lot on definitions, ethics. Ethics as a system is a theory of acceptable behaviors. So that's a key part of ethics. Ethics refers to behaviors. You can't really have in this context, an unethical thought. So, gosh, probably 40 years ago at this point, maybe even longer, 45 years ago, President Jimmy Carter, who is known as being a really kind of strong, moral, religious individual, was asked about fidelity and monogamy in his marriage. And he explained to the person that he was speaking to that he, of course, had been faithful to his wife, but that he had committed adultery in his heart many times. And boy, did they nail him to the wall for this answer. And what was he basically saying? He was saying that he had seen people, presumably women. As far as I know, Jimmy Carter is pretty much a fully straight guy, but he has seen or encountered or met women to whom he was attracted and had sexual thoughts about. That is not unethical. It's the next step, is where we come into ethical issues. So ethics deals ultimately, in the context that we're considering them, ethics ultimately deal with behaviors. Now, morality, on the other hand, is the application of an ethical philosophy. So morality, broadly speaking, in a historical context, morality, to some extent, provides the why behind ethical behaviors and ethical choice making. I'm not going to go into that too much more right now because we will talk about it quite a bit throughout the term. But I think for right now, the difference is ethics ties to behavior. Morality is a philosophical concept. It's more about why folks do what they're doing. And morality can sort of scoot into the area of thought policing. Morals are principles that guide an individual. So I have my set of morals very closely related to values. Each of you has your individual set of morals. It's closely related to your values. Your morals and your morality may lead you to entirely different conclusions than I am led to by my morals and my morality. Well, ethics, on the other hand, doesn't have that subjective quality. So maybe, let's say, actually I'm gonna skip an example because I think just stating it as it is probably the clearest. Ethics, we're talking behavior. Morals and morality, we're talking about philosophy and where we're coming from, right? Philosophical morality is concerned with assessment of individuals' actions. So we have morality in the term philosophical morality, along with the term philosophical. So what we're talking about with philosophical morality is assessing or judging behaviors in a moral context rather than in an ethical context. Now, I don't want to go too far in trying to say that ethics and morality are completely separate, because they certainly aren't. Not all the time, anyway. Although they are distinct. Philosophical ethics, in contrast to philosophical morality, provides a framework for theoretical analysis of what is good, right, or worthy. I could see, especially this is the first time we're being introduced to these ideas, it seems like 5 kind of abstract constructs that overlap quite a bit. And I think that's a fair assessment. But I think as we move through the course, we'll be able to distinguish more clearly between ethics and morality and morals and philosophical morality and philosophical ethics. So at this point, we're really just trying to lay out a framework of ideas to be thinking about. Professional ethics, this is going to be pretty common sense, Professional ethics refers to standards of practice that are established by a given profession that guide a practitioner's behavior. So you can see here where this starts to kind of veer away from morality a little bit. And there's a little film clip that I'm going to share with you guys that will illustrate this, I think, to some extent. Professional ethics, again, and not to just reread what's right in front of you, but professional ethics are standards of practice established by a profession that guide practitioners' choices. And without me kind of giving you a canned answer, start to think about how that's a little bit different from morality. Legally mandated ethics are ethics that are enforced by the law. In the case of our field and related fields, psychologists, licensed professional counselors, physicians, violation of legally mandated ethics can result in loss of the right or of the privilege to practice, loss of license, in fact. So professional ethics are going to be kind of a within field sort of system. What you're going to see throughout the course is that as a field, our our professional ethical standards are generally higher than ethical standards that are legally mandated. So if we're sticking to our professional ethics, for the most part, we're not going to be in trouble with legal ethics. Legally mandated ethics frequently are there just to outline the bare minimum. Although, as you will also see, there are times when professional ethics can be in conflict with legally mandated ethics. Purpose of licensure, you know what, I'm not actually going to go into this too much right now, other than to say that licensure and other credentials are established to protect the community from unqualified providers. And we'll get back to that later in the semester, but let's just leave it at that for now and keep moving on in the interest of keeping things short, which, as you all know, can be difficult for me sometimes. Ethics governance, again, this is going to be pretty, got good face validity, easy to figure out. It's the process of professional discipline for a counselor or an organization, say an academic program or a counseling practice that has been engaging in unethical behavior. So ethics governance is concerned with enforcing ethical standards and bringing sanctions or punishment, if you will, to bear when ethical standards are violated. Mandatory ethics, I think you could debate that the law is the ultimate source of mandatory ethics in the context of what I said one of the past slides about the law oftentimes provides the bare minimum of what's required ethically. Nevertheless, mandatory ethics are those ethical standards that we must follow. And again, on this slide, I've got compliance with the law. I would probably include some ethical standards that are in uh, uh, codes of professional ethics too. It means I'm following the letter of the law. Aspirational ethics is what we're striving for. Uh, it's the effects of the decisions that we make on the welfare of our clients. So what we're going to see is that there is really a continuation or a continuum of ethics, with mandatory ethics being kind of at the bottom, things that we must follow, or if we get, you can't see my air quotes, but if we get caught violating mandatory ethics, we're in big trouble. Aspirational ethics represent my desire, and hopefully all of our desires, to practice in the most ethical fashion that we're capable of. So this next slide is slide 12 of 15, so we're really almost there. Licensure, I'm not going to go over that too much today. We will talk about it later. It allows a person to practice a profession and prevents people from practicing that profession who are not properly qualified. Certification serves a similar function, and accreditation serves a similar function for training programs. For example, I cannot go by the topic of accreditation without mentioning that our program, your program, just received dual accreditation for clinical rehabilitation and mental health counseling. There's something like 125 rehab programs in the country. We were one of 24 to achieve this accreditation. So it's actually a big deal. It has the potential to make a real difference in your career. It adds some cachet to your degree. It adds some prestige to our program. You'll certainly hear about it more throughout this course and just in general, because it's a pretty big deal. We just got our letter back, I think 2 weeks ago, indicating that we achieved the dual accreditation, that we have met the standards set by KCREP to teach students such that they can specialize in rehab and in mental health. And that's a big deal. There's not a lot of programs doing that. So it's a moment to kind of give yourselves a pat on the back for having selected and been selected by our program. It really is meaningful. So licensure and certification at the individual level allow people to practice. Accreditation is at the organizational level, and specifically with regard to educational programs. And right now we have the premier accreditation label available to programs of our type. So that's pretty cool. Moving on with some definitions briefly. What is an ethical dilemma? Well, sometimes I think of it, I hear the term ethical dilemma, and I instantly think ethical screw up, like an ethical goof up, ethical mistake. And really that's not what an ethical dilemma is. An ethical dilemma is a situation where a counselor or practitioner is stuck between a rock and a hard place, where there are competing or conflicting ethical standards that apply to a given situation. If you think back to the idea of aspirational ethics that was mentioned a couple slides back, well, ethical dilemmas give us an opportunity to implement and develop our aspirational ethics. Because if we have two choices to make and they both meet minimum or minimal ethical standards, we want to be trained and seasoned to the extent that we pick the most ethical choice. And a major idea of mine that we'll talk about throughout the semester is that 9.9 times out of 10, the best ethical decision is the best ethical decision because it is the best clinical decision. I'm not going to say anything more about that right now, but we will talk about it later in the semester. There is, the slide I've got worded as saying there is a conflict between what is ethical and what is moral. I think it's probably more accurate to say there frequently is, or there can be, or it is possible for there to be a conflict between what is ethical and what is moral. And again, I'm going to ask you guys to watch it's like a 3-minute news clip video, and I think it'll illustrate the potential conflict there. There are complexities that make application of ethical standards unclear at times, and there are circumstances that will arise in your practice that prevent clear application of standards. And so these last two bullets, I guess we'll call them C and D here, they really tie into the second bullet about the idea between conflict between ethics and morality. Well, what do you do when there is such a conflict? We're all trying to be the best people that we can be. Even more so than we're trying to be the best counselors that we can be. Well, what do we do when our ethical standards demand decisions that are inconsistent with our individual morality? Well, that's where we see item C, complexities arising that can make the application of ethical standards unclear, and where other circumstances can prevent clear application of standards, and I'd say clear interpretation of standards too. So these are some of the bigger ideas that we're going to be looking at throughout the semester. Again, I want to underline that idea of awareness. So if you look at those A through D bullets, a kind of the easy answer out to most of the issues presented in those bullets is awareness. Awareness is what's going to help us get through these competing forces. Again, we'll talk about this in depth more and throughout the semester. So, wrapping up here with the last slide, ethical and clinical considerations are frequently closely related, and those are my own words there. I think I probably could have worded it more strongly. Ethical and clinical considerations are almost always closely related. The ethically correct course of action, it again I've got written down here, is often correct because it's clinically correct. I'm going to take that a step further and say that generally it's more of an almost always type deal. The ethically correct course of action is almost always correct because it is clinically correct. And we talked about this a little bit in Theories 1, right? Therefore, counseling skills involves a synthesis of knowledge and skills that are critical for for delivering appropriate service. So that synthesis of knowledge and skills, I think I kind of missed something in that bullet. And that synthesis is, it's knowledge and skills. So you need to know your ethical codes, your ethical standards. What are the objective sources of ethical information? You need to have the skills to implement them. You need to be able to synthesize those two. But you also need to be able to synthesize them with your own personal, individualized ethical and moral framework. Again, this is a big theme that we'll talk about throughout this semester. Ethics codes themselves is almost a little tag on. Probably could even have completed the slideshow without it. But ethics codes themselves integrate conventional standards of decent conduct. So they put together what we generally accept as being acceptable with research-based, empirically validated, so that means scientifically validated through systematic observation, clinical knowledge to ensure the well-being, success, and safety of individual clients. It's probably safer and more accurate to say to promote the well-being, success, and safety of the clients. If we could ensure those things, well, we'd certainly be in a flourishing field, right? If we could ensure or guarantee that anyone we worked with enhance their well-being, their success, and their safety. That's the last substantive slide. I'm going to ask you to please take a look at the non-audio version of these slides. You can skip through them if you'd like, but do click the purple link that's included on the last slide for the non-audio version. It's going to take you to a CNN link addressing a law, I think in Kentucky, that has since passed. At the time that the news report was made, the law had been proposed but not passed. This law has since passed, and it's a law that permits counselors to refuse to see certain clients if those clients live lifestyles that the counselor deems to be in conflict with their religious beliefs. I'll just be kind of straight out and blunt. This definitely falls into the school of thought that is frequently labeled as politically correct currently, right? Um, the idea here is that you have religiously strict folks who are trained as master's level counselors, who are saying, uh, you know what, my religious beliefs don't permit me to work with gay people. I understand that topic is somewhat maybe politically charged for some folks, and there's kind of this backlash against the idea of political correctness. I will also admit, I think it's only fair to admit that I have a fairly liberal and progressive bias myself. I'm not trying to hide that from anyone. I respect everyone's ideas, but you might as well know up front where I'm coming from. But the question is, for counselors who are practitioners of a discipline that is guided by an ethical code that requires us to serve all individuals, for counselors in that discipline who are also members of religious or other cultural groups that prohibit enabling or facilitating or giving comfort to lifestyles that they do not approve of, that is an ethical issue. And from my perspective, it's a great example of where an ethical decision, the best ethical decision, is the best clinical decision. Because when we're counselors, we're clinicians. If we have someone come into our office who's struggling with their sexual orientation, what is the best clinician going to do in that situation? The best clinician is going to work with that individual. That same clinician might have a challenge doing so if they belong to a religious or cultural group that opposes gay relationships, right? So you'd have the moral perspective dictated by religion or culture that gay relationships are unacceptable on the one hand, and then you'd have the ethical perspective dictated by our profession, indicating that we're required to serve all people, irrespective of their sexual orientation, much like physicians or attorneys. So it's a short video. They'll be much more entertaining to watch and listen to than me, and it paints a really clear picture for me of this conflict that can arise between ethics and morality. So I apologize. As typical, I went over a little bit longer than I anticipated. Thanks for sticking in there. I really am looking forward to working with you guys. We're getting to a point in the program for a lot of us where we're getting to know each other well. I think we're going to have a great semester. I always enjoy teaching this course, and really my course evaluations over the years have indicated that students enjoy the course as well. So thanks for listening, and I'll talk to y'all real soon. Bye-bye.